Our next guest has been a most helpful resource to Sekeres and Price, our listeners, followers over the years, because anytime we had a question about the CBA or this, that, or the other thing, we would go to Hart Levine, the founder of PuckPedia, who joins us now from his home in Los Angeles. Hart, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, busy few days.
I'm
Great to be with
sure.
you.
How's it feel to be the new it girl?
Yeah, I've just been grinding at it for 7 years, and yeah, and all of a sudden, getting some attention. So yeah, it's great. It's been a long road to get to where we are today, and just excited for the opportunity, maybe for more people to see the site and learn about it and give it a shot.
You get to monitor that on the daily, much like we do with our show. You get to do with your webpage visits and that sort of thing. I mean, has it been a pretty substantial spike here?
For sure, yeah. It's been a big jump. I mean, it's amazing the timing. Just last week, we did some upgrades to, prepare for free agency, and we upgraded the capacity and the speed, and also made it more flexible to respond if there's traffic spikes. And I'm just like, thank goodness we did that last week, because that would have been not a great first impression for some people if we couldn't handle the initial surge.
We're going to talk more about PuckPedia, its genesis, and where it's going here in a moment. But first, Hart, take me back a couple of days ago when you heard the news the Washington Capitals were purchasing CapFriendly. What did you make of it? And what do you think it means for your operation at PuckPedia?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting decision. It's like, I always thought sites similar to mine or theirs, like maybe it would, a big media company might feel like it was a good fit. I just hadn't really thought of a team wanting to buy it completely. So yeah, it took me a bit by surprise. I think it certainly shows the value of a resource and a tool like this. Like, I mean, obviously, since they're taking it private, like they didn't value the audience or the traffic that it got or the ads. They valued the tool and the ability to manage and handle all the salary cap information and calculations and contracts and potentially now using it to model things out. So I mean, it's good validation that a product like this has a lot of value to people inside the game. And then seeing the public response, I think it's super validating and encouraging that there's a huge hunger for this type of information from fans. I mean, when I put the energy into building the site many years ago, I mean, part of the premise was it's hard to be a fan of a team and think you're smarter than your team's GM if you don't know the salary cap situation, right? And so we wanted to make a site where that information was available in an accessible way to both casual and hardcore fans, and engage in the information and try to put everything a hockey fan needs in one place. So when they are sitting at the bar arguing, they can just pull up one thing and get what they need.
Did you have a barometer for how much the industry used your site and CapFriendly combined? Like, we've had a bit of astonishment here that, hey, are they maybe easier than some of the interfaces they have in-house? Potentially. But it just seems unfathomable that there wasn't more in-house versions of this. What was your understanding about how much the industry actually used you guys?
No, that part wasn't surprising at all. Through my relationships, yeah, I mean, and I do some business with teams similar to CapFriendly was doing, so I got to understand what they have available. And I mean, there's been a lot of public reports like the NHL just doesn't seem to value providing this information in a very usable, digestible way that can be analyzed, both either publicly or privately. Like, so obviously the teams have access to the data. They can look up whatever they need, and that's the NHL's response. They have access to it. But there's a difference between having access to look up a number versus having it in a usable platform, and also accessing the data in a way that teams can add value to it, analyze it, present it in different ways, use it in modeling environments. So I mean, there's a disparity with how far along teams are, but some teams have really robust tools that, like, maybe similar to what the Capitals are doing with this acquisition. Like, they have their own internal platforms and dashboards, but none of that is useful without data to put into it, right? So I knew that even the teams that had tools, they didn't have a good pipeline internally from the league to receive that data.
this sounds a lot like hockey analytics, right? That even to this point, but certainly a couple of years ago, how each team used it, it was very individual as to how robust the analytics departments were.
For sure. And there's like to all that, it's not just as simple as like analytics. Like there's 3 components. There's finding something to feed into it so you can actually analyze and do it. And then like with analytics, that's where all the tracking technology and AI is coming to make some of that easier. There's people there's a system to be able to view it and look at it and analyze it and like crunch the numbers. And then there's smart people to be able to like gain some insights and turn into something that a management team can actually do something with. So you need to kind of have all those 3 elements to be successful. And I think, teams in the NHL some have all 3 and some have various, like, they're better at some of them than others, but you kind of need all 3 of those because you can have a really cool system of smart people. If you don't have useful data to feed into it, that doesn't really get you anywhere either.
Hart, how old's PuckPedia now?
We launched almost exactly this time in 2018, so 6 years.
Okay.
So overnight success, 6 years in the making.
Hey, so tell us the story. Tell us your story. Like, tell us where you were 6 years ago that brought you to find this, establish this, and you said we a couple of times now. Tell us about the journey of PuckPedia here from its infancy.
Sure. So, originally from Edmonton, huge hockey fan. My professional background and education originally was accounting and business and finance. So obviously really into the numbers. And, when the salary cap first came out, I was on, I think the very first site was NHL Numbers. I was on there checking it out and obviously a big user of Cap Geek and was interested in that, wanted to figure out a way into the hockey world a bit. And so, about 7 years ago, I wanted to be more entrepreneurial. So I started doing some business ventures, which also, let me be more control of my own time. And so I kind of had an idea for what I wanted PuckPedia to be. Like I mentioned earlier, there's one of the key components is I wanted it to be accessible to a casual fan. Like I was the guy in the group that people would ask salary cap questions and contract questions to, but I would say, well, there's sites you can go find that information. And they said, oh, no, those are kind of intimidating. I don't think I know enough to go on there. So I wanted it to be very accessible to a casual fan. I wanted it to be one place that had most of the information. Because again, as a fan, I had different tabs open, flipping between different websites for, injury news and stats and advanced stats and things like that. And then I want it to be really interactive and not just a place for people to see information, but a place for people to engage in and use the information and model things out. Coming back to that tenet, like I think most people think they're smarter than their team's GM, or at least they want to be the team's GM. And so you got to give them the information, the tools to do that. So I'm not a developer. I partnered with a really talented former hockey player that's a developer, built the site out, launched it in 2018. It's gone through a lot of updates since then and growth. And, through that, built a lot of relationships through the league to gather the information. Actually in March, we launched sort of version 2, a whole new design for it, which had been a long time in the making and good timing now. And, between myself and we're adding a little bit more development resources, we were already planning to go fast over the next couple of months, but I think with this news, we're going even faster. So the part of the original vision that I think we have more work to do is on that interactivity. So we have some interesting tools, like we launched a pick value trade calculator and a cap relief trade calculator. But we had a interactive GM tool. We took it down with the new design. We wanted to make a better one. So speeding that up, hopefully have that up in a couple of weeks, and keep going. And this is a great opportunity because, with more attention, more interest, more traffic, it allows me to put some more resources to it, and it will just allow us to go faster and make it better much quicker.
So it's a 2-person operation with a little bit of farmed out work. Is that what I'm hearing, Hart?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of the work on it, and I've got some development help from a couple key people, and I've got some support to keep the site updated with some of the data entry parts, and hopefully trying to build some of that team up now to go faster.
Because Blake and I were wondering here yesterday, like how chained are these guys to every transaction that you see, not just across the NHL wire, but like the AHL wire and everything else. We go deep on these sites. Like, how many hours a day do you put into this? And are you sitting there on the transaction wire all day?
It's a lot. Luckily, I have some help with like the day-to-day transactions, but it's certainly like from after the trade deadline till now, it's like a nice relief not to have to worry about there's going to be a huge signing or trade or even guys getting called up and down. Yeah, once we get now this week, the pressure starts to ramp up. Oh, I better not put my phone down because there's going to be there could be something happening. For sure. It is. It's definitely a commitment for sure. But I do have help, which makes a big difference.
Is this full-time for you, or was there a time that it became full-time?
No, I mean, I still have my other business interests that I handle, but it seems like it's going to be taking up more and more time. And that's exciting. I mean, obviously I love hockey. I love to be in the business of hockey, and we'll see where it goes from here.
When you say contacts with teams and doing work for teams, did they find you and reach out, or did you go hustle and try and make inroads with NHL?
It's a mix. It's a mix. I mean, I'm not shy, so I cold call and reach out to agents and teams trying to track down information. And so through some of that and the persistence, you start to build up relationships. And then I've had some inbound people reaching out, appreciating the site, or like just you saying that, or hey, they appreciate the site, but there's something that needs to be updated and they want to help keep it accurate, which is super appreciated as well. So yeah, it's been a combination. And you know, when I started, I was thinking like, well, you know, I had some ideas and I did a bunch of knocking on doors to get some of the initial information. I didn't know exactly how I was going to stay up on all the information, but that part has really come along. And yeah, all these years later, I have a really good network from teams and agents and media and people in the league to help keep it all updated and accurate.
Couple of years left in the CBA. Will you get nervous during CBA negotiate? I don't think the salary cap's going away. Have you done the calculus on what a luxury tax would do for the site and for the business? Would it just change the puzzle, or do you think it diminishes the puzzle and makes maybe the site less attractive if there's escape routes for teams and maybe the puzzle isn't as difficult as it once was?
I think if you make the rules more complicated, the site becomes more valuable. I mean, you look at like NBA, NFL, it's way more complicated. Like as a fan, I go on sites for those sports to check it out, and I could probably try to spend time to get into it, but I think I have enough with the NHL, so I just kind of rely on those numbers. Yeah, there's a little bit of anxiety of like, oh my God, if there's a more complicated calculations, we're going to have to rebuild that. But that's a fun challenge. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I live in it, but I think the NHL salary cap system is pretty simple. Like the LTIR piece, we'll put that aside. That's complicated, and that's another area. But the basic salary cap system, I mean, it's a hard cap that you take the average per year. Like, so the cap, it doesn't fluctuate each year. You can't renegotiate other than a buyout. Like, I don't know. It seems pretty straightforward to me. I mean, there's work to do the math and the daily, how it works, like cap space accrues. Takes a little bit of time to get used to, but it's way easier than in the NBA where you've got exceptions and bird rights and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Different teams are under the cap, over the cap, aprons. That seems more complicated.
No, we said the same thing.
Don't get me started on the mid-level exception. And
exactly.
Dead money, like just forget about it.
MLS TAM.
Yeah, exactly.
You can buy down cap
oh my
space.
God.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the cap and the jigsaw puzzle, because we hear from a lot of listeners, we've heard this for years now that, you know, man, I wish we didn't talk about their salaries so much. I just want to enjoy hockey. But it sounds to me like the jigsaw puzzle of the salary cap, that's enhanced your enjoyment of the league and the sport. Is that fair, Art?
I think so. I mean, I'll just share, like growing up at Edmonton, like the trades that the Oilers made was the guys were getting too expensive. They literally didn't have the money for them. They'd have to ship them off, right? So you could never dream of like trading for a really good player. It was all about like, I hope this guy doesn't get too good, and then you have to trade him off, you know. And then the real change for me was salary cap comes in, first trade, Oilers trade for Chris Pronger because like they had a level playing field, they could pay him the same as everybody else. So I mean, for me, I think it makes it more interesting. It does put teams in a level playing field. The really high revenue teams, they can't just go and pay more for players, and so it really adds to the puzzle. It makes each team really have to work that puzzle to the best that they can, and a mistake could really set the franchise back, right? You can't just buy your way out of it. So I think it's just like any kind of game you might play. It just ratchets up the difficulty level, right? When you have a salary cap, And yeah, I like the puzzle and how the pieces go together. Like you see teams that are rebuilding and they have lots of cap space, and that seems like really exciting. And then we've seen it can go really wrong quickly if they commit money to the wrong players long term, and within a couple of years they go from tons of cap space and being involved in cap dumps to all of a sudden they're the team trying to get players off the roster. And I think that's interesting.
The fans here are excited because the Vancouver Canucks are pretty much in every market except the goaltending market, and you could argue maybe they're in that as well from the selling standpoint. Do you take a look at the classes? Like, what do you think of this class of free agent for July 1st? Do you think this is any different a class than we've seen in years gone by? Noting that guys like Stamkos probably never make it to July 1st, although we'll soon see this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in some ways better. Like, I don't think there's necessarily like a huge superstar, but there's some really, really good players. There's some elite players. Like the last couple of years, there really wasn't much out there. So, sometimes there was one like, Panarin a few years ago was a really, really good one. But I'd say we had a lot of like maybe C's and B's. Now I think we've got a lot of A-minuses, which I think is really interesting. So, and then you add in the fact that the cap's basically been flat for 5 years. So it's good to see that there's good players that are potentially going to get big contracts. I think back to the NBA a few years ago. They had a year where there was the new TV deal kicked in and the cap jumped like a massive amount. And you had players that most fans hadn't heard of getting like massive deals and getting paid more than the superstars on the team. It soaked up all the money that one summer. And then like 2 years later, superstars, there wasn't any money for them. And so I think this is good in the sense that the cap has gone up, but not by so much that teams are like have an unlimited amount to spend. And there's actually some players available that are somewhat deserving of decent money deals, like a Gensel, Reinhardt, even a Marchessault, an older player like that. So yeah, I think it's a good mix of some cap space, but not too much cap space available, and a decent crop.
For those who aren't familiar with PuckPedia, Hart, and have been had the CapFriendly window open for however long they've had it open, what are the similarities and what are some of the distinctions of your site?
Yeah, well, I think the things that are unique to PuckPedia that I've always been really excited about. So we're the only place that has agent information. So we show an agent leaderboard ranking all the agents by either the number of contracts or the money under management. And then for each agent, we show their client list. I know Canucks fans get a lot of use out of that with looking at Milstein's clients and some of the agents that have sort of had a oversized influence on the Canucks roster just by either how many players they had or like the big money players that they had. So I find that really interesting, and that gets a lot of interest because, again, it's the only place to find that. And I think we forget that these are human beings involved. It's not just like a video game. So your team wants to sign a player. Sometimes that relationship with the agent is very important. Like, have they done deals together? Have they had contention before? Like that? Yes, they have to do what's in the best interest of their client, of course, but they're human beings, and that human element comes into what's going to happen. So I find that part interesting. We have some little things that you might not notice at first, but I think are a good way to look at it. So if you look at a player's stats, like their stats history, it's actually broken down. Also, it shows what contract they were on for those stats. So you can kind of look at the history of a player, and you can be like, how did this guy get this contract? And then you look, oh, well, it's because the 1 year before his contract kicked in, he had a big year. I like seeing that breakdown of the stats with the contract information layered in. Little things like if you look at the draft page of players that were drafted, the draft class, you can see all the entry-level deals. And so you can kind of scroll and see how they change as the picks get later, and guys that maybe got a better deal than guys picked before them. And that's kind of interesting. And then the couple of things we recently launched, which I'm really excited about, we partnered with Matt Perry, who used to be the director of analytics for the Coyotes. And he built some really interesting models. So the one is the pick value calculator. We often see draft picks getting traded for each other. This is an interactive tool that you can use. You can see how the value of picks compare. You can even take a couple different picks, like the 10th versus the 15th, and click find fair trade, and it'll add picks until it gets to an equivalent value. So you can use that for modeling what trade you might like to see, or if there is a trade, you can use that to see how the value compares. Like we saw that Chicago Islanders trade not long ago. It's interesting to see like the value wasn't equal. So that means that either one team has just a different model than what Matt came up with. They value picks differently, or they have another use for the pick that they got, or they want to use that to move up and down even more. They have some other moves coming. So I think it's really interesting for that. And then as the offshoot of that is the cap relief model. So that's using historical trades where players were traded just for pure cap relief. So that's like a third party retaining team, or if a player has like 0 NHL value and it's just like a cap hit that is going to be buried in the minors or something, what is the expected return for trades like that? And at the trade deadline, it was very accurate for especially the third party retention team. So, a team ended up taking on $500,000 of cap space, and the calculator expected it to be in a late 4th round pick, and that's what it ended up being. So tools like that I think are really cool, because it that's what front offices are using, some version of that. And so again, if you want to either daydream of what your team should do or evaluate what they did, it gives you some of the same tools that those teams would have at their disposal.
Yeah, and one of the other tools that Sekeres and Price listeners over the years I know have taken advantage of is the Ask a Capologist.
Yes, so that's a good point. Yeah, so we built up a pretty good sort of knowledge database there of CBA and salary cap questions. So there's just some basic things out there, and then there's a whole bunch of people submit questions, and then I post the answer to it, and you can search through it. So yeah, that's a very popular one. I remember the Luongo recapture. I got flooded with questions. There's a whole Luongo recapture article on there. A lot of them have been inspired by your outrage of certain topics, right? And then I get flooded with questions.
Yeah, from time to time I get notes from them going, "Oh yeah, I see your outrage there." Well, there should be so you know X, Y, and Z, and
there should be a drop-down menu: the Canucks and the salary cap, just a whole separate wing to the sites.
Exactly, I agree.
Amazing. Well, like I said, my friend, you've been an extraordinary resource for us over the years. I am so pleased that you and the site are getting all the shine that you're getting this week. And we'll do our utmost to funnel people your way hard, because it's a fantastic product. And we appreciate all the help over the years, including the time here.
I really appreciate all the support over the years. And I'm certainly getting, more attention and support now. But the people that have been supportive of me for many years, obviously don't forget that. And it means a lot. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Art.
You're a good man. Thank you, sir.
Take care. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.